Thanks very much for joining us in this seminar. And it's my great pleasure to have Mr. Andy Ma to deliver the seminar on risk management and artificial intelligence. I just want to say a little bit about him. I knew Andy from last year, 1 year, but he felt that I know him for a very long time. So it's like a very good friend that I've known for a long time. So it's kind of interesting. But he has taken such proactive stance in helping the graduate diploma in analytics and visualization that I'm running. So I'm very, very grateful, eternally grateful to you, Andy, for helping. So a bit more about his background. So he has really interesting and diverse background. Started off at NUS. He received a Bachelor of Science in Building and Project Management and Facilities Management. And when I asked him, what's the deal with big data and AI there, he said that during the final year project, he was interested in using AI and machine learning. So that kind of piqued his interest in big data and machine learning. Then he also has a grad diploma in IT services, and that's where he has move on to the data science and data analytics. I'm sorry, I'm not sure whether you should call data science or data analytics, but I'll just use data science field. So he has done a lot, and very rich experience really, and was working for ServiceNow, at ServiceNow, Ivanti, ByteDance, where he's currently the Director of Operation and Enablement. ByteDance, you probably know TikTok, and that's the company that, that's owned by ByteDance. So besides his involvement in data science, is also involved in entrepreneurship. And in fact, he has a minor in entrepreneurship from NUS Business School. So he's with the NUS Angel Ventures, and he's also helping. You're also the industry advisor for the SUSS. I don't know what you call it.
Venture building.
Venture building,
yeah, venture building program.
Venture builder, yeah, I think that's what they call it. Yeah. So also in entrepreneurship. So that's the reason why he's in a good position to talk about risk management and artificial intelligence, because not many people would be straddling between business and also AI and machine learning. And currently he's the president of Risk and Insurance Management Association of Singapore, RIMAS. So, and he has been involved with RIMAS over last couple of years, since 2014, and he was elected as president in 2020. So over to you, Andy.
Yep, thanks a lot, Nicholas, for the introduction. And thanks everyone for your time today. So I know we have maybe 50 minutes together. So I really want to manage the expectation of today's session. It's really about sharing with you the future forward in terms of AI and risk. And it's a perspective where I will share from the past to current to the future. So feel free to pick up information, right, that you think will help you in your own journey, right? There are things that you can take away, and there may be things that may not be relevant, right? So I try to cater to as many people as possible. So I hope this will be enjoyable for you, right? So just a bit of disclaimer. So as a risk management association, nothing here were intended to be legal advisors. But of course, it applies to another institute. It's a leadership think tank founded by Dr. James Ong. He's actually a veteran in AI since 1986. I recently joined them as an expert member in the field of AI governance. So when actually Nicholas came to me, I think this should be a topic that I should help everyone to start thinking about, because we are really, really very early in this area, right? As in globally, we are very early. I will not talk too much about RIMAS. Go to our website, take a look. But fundamentally, we focus a lot on hazard risk, operation risk, financial risk, and strategic risk. Where do AI governance play across the board? So like I mentioned, what is a sustainable AI? I think this is the topic today, right? So I really want to bring you guys through. Again, a lot of the contents are sponsored by AIII. So you will see some of the logos that I'm recognizing them. This conference has been done in Shanghai last year in a manufacturing AI conference, world conference. So this year they are organizing another World AI conference. I think the 1-2 years back, there was Jack Ma involved, all right, in that conference, and many other very famous AI individuals, right? So today's topic is really about nurturing AI technology, right? Ecosystem. We all have heard a lot, right? So the hype itself, the greed itself, right, actually probably got us a bit lost of focus. And we need to basically understand where the balance lies, right? And take into consideration things like humanities, governance, ethics and stuff, right? If not, actually the outcome, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen in news, right? There are a lot of issues happening in the world because these matters are not being looked into. So the thought leadership today that I would like to share is really around digital transformation of society and organization, so that we can move towards what we call autonomous enterprise. There's another term called the autonomous society, right? But I will keep that away for now because it really involves so much more things. So enterprise means companies, right? Large companies that has a lot of controls and power today. How do we work with them to achieve this? So I brought in 6 topics. In between, there are some subtopics, right? I'll talk about history of AI. It's really important to know a little bit about the history. I will not, well, it's like 700 over years of history, so I'll not talk about 700 over years. I'll take the beginning and the current. What AI is and is not, or not yet, right? What are the current hot AI research? So if you're thinking about projects, applied methodologies, areas of research, item number 3 is what you should be focusing on. Autonomous enterprise. So this is again an idea that AI and REMAS currently we are working on, and AI governance, right? Design and technologies for AI risk management. And a lot of people say, hey, and AI hasn't even finished the 1.0. Why are you in 3.0 already? Right? So again, it really depends on countries to countries. If you are in the US, they probably just hit 1.0, right? Or in Europe, in places like China, they are already pretty much ahead. They are in 2.0 and talking about 3.0 today, right? They even have their own principle around what is AI, right? And yeah, so I'll talk a little bit more in item number 6. So that forms the agenda for today. So kicking off with the very first agenda, history of AI. So the oldest trace of AI happens back in 1308. Right? That's already 712 years ago. A poet and a theologians, right, basically come together to create new knowledge, right? Something that we are still doing today, right? Just that they are using paper or maybe carvings, right? But I want to trace you guys back to the time we can digest better. So back in 1956, there were a few AI pioneers. These are people who has won Turing Awards. So Turing Awards is actually one of those awards that is awarded to the field of computer sciences, where it's almost like a Nobel Prize, right, in areas of AI. And John McCarthy is one of them. We also have Marvin Minsky, Herbert Simon, Alan Newell. So these people are the ones who, they came together, they organized a workshop, right, in Dartmouth College. Actually, a lot of people didn't turn up, right? It ended up only 10 people. So, a lot of new things started like this. Even REMAS, we started that way, right? And then AI actually experienced 2 waves of industrialization. So for those who are not aware, the first wave actually happens in 1980s. Right, there was a theory of symbolic logic knowledge, which I will share a little bit what it meant. Basically, it's rule-based. A lot of people who talks about automation, right? The rule-based automation, that is similar to symbolic logic, right? And actually, it came from Japan's, right? 5th generation computer projects. That drove the first wave. And the second wave, actually, I think most of us are more familiar in 2015, where DeepMind AlphaGo, this computer program came out, and this program actually beats one of the gold champion, Lee Sedol, right? So this is a South Korean professional Go player. And that was somewhat, a revolution, a second wave that came about, right? And by the way, the first wave died off. It didn't last, right? So for those who are interested in history, this is just a very quick snapshot of what has happened, in the history. So there were two winters, right? And currently we are riding on the boom tree where people talk about machine learning. Again, Stanford, MIT, Simon, McCarthy, back in the 1960s, they were already in this space, right? In this heuristic search space, right? So some of my research here also depends a lot around the Stanford University 100 years AI studies. So they are looking at 1960s to 2060s kind of development, right? So what's so difficult about AI, right? So I think a lot of us has always been asking this question. Is AI good or evil? In fact, prior to this session, Nicholas and the rest of the team here, we were talking about it. What are the ethical issues? AI is a vicious competition, right? And we also saw a lot of videos where AI becomes a weapon of mass disruption, where drones can be targeted to someone's brain, right? I think some of us probably caught some of those videos. And is human being going to be enslaved by AI, right? So these are some of the things that that's bothering a lot of researchers, human rights activists, ethics researchers also, right? And that's the reason why, when I say there's an AI winter, means there was a hype and suddenly it went quiet, right? So when it went quiet, it doesn't mean there wasn't any research being done. It was just been crowded by a lot of conflicts, a lot of debates, etc. Right? So in this slide, I just want to help some of those who are embarking on this AI research into looking at what sort of technologies, what sort of application, and what sort of challenges and consequences, risk, and control that you need to put in place, right, to help you to have a better perspective, how to start somewhere, right? So again, AI, this term has been coined by John McCarthy himself back then. This term AI wasn't really something that is in 1307, right? So, and he defines this way, right? He says that every aspect of learning or any other features of intelligence can be, in principle, be so precisely described that a machine can simulate. So we are not talking about emulating, it's just simulating, right? So you realize that, hey, and this statement is so brief, and it's a good and bad thing, right? So the lack of precision actually helps how AI has progressed today, right? And is accelerating in a pace, where technologies are supporting it. So I'd like to bring you guys into some applications. So if you look at onto the left-hand side of the column, I have specifically chosen some application, not exhaustive, things like transportation and home service robots, right? So for this case, what are the challenges? Actually, the real challenge is the difficulties of creating a safe and reliable hardware. It is less of the machine learning part. It is whether the hardware, can react or be very flexible, be very sensitive to perform very precise task, right, in a very fast speed. So I like to bring your attention to the bottom, right? So if you compare to a calculator, arithmetic calculator, and a human brain, they are not one of a kind, right? But they are of scale, speed, autonomy, and generality, right? So it is not that human brain is being replaced by a calculator, right? It's just that a calculator is a lot more scalable, right? And it helps human to achieve that speed. And it doesn't listen to anybody, right? A calculator is a calculator, right? And it applies to everybody. So it has that generality, right? So this is where AI comes in, right? So AI comes into looking at how in the area of transportation, right, we can help to speed certain tasks, right? In the future, AI may include not just vehicles, like cars, right? It may include flying vehicles or robots at home, right? But what AI is not yet, right? So this is something that people are thinking. It is still not a common means of transportation. So the question here to the team here is, if I'm to offer you a captainless helicopter or plane, would you buy that ticket, even though it is free? So yeah, think about. So I'm putting you through that mindset. You see, so the mindset of that, the societal mindset has not yet feel trusted, comfortable, right? It could be ethical issues that they don't trust. It could be privacy issue that they don't trust. It could be technology issues that they don't trust, right? So here on the right-hand side, you can see that, Elon Musk has tried it, right? He has tried that in June 2016, something terrible happened. And you realize that this is really the focus. They are focusing on how these robots can interact with the societal human beings, right? But what is actually more important to sustain a technology like this is about the ethics, right? The privacy issues that may surface as a result, right? And the trust, right, in an individual who is going to commit into that technology, right? So that is my first use case, right, for people in this group, right? Breaking down into challenges, what AI is for this application, what AI is not, and some of the risk control. On the next use case, of course, I will go a little bit faster. I think you guys can appreciate better right now with that very first case as an example. Healthcare, right? So again, I've been part of healthcare before. Trust me, it's all about the specialists, the medical doctors. It's not so much about the equipment, right? Or the technology behind. So how can a machine work with a specialist, work with a human experts? Actually, that's what the healthcare sector people are worrying when it comes to AI. And what AI is in healthcare is really to make that fine-grained judgment, right? That a normal human could do it today, but with a high error of a high human error percentage, while AI could reduce that error percentage, right? So for example, a slightly darker smudge, right, in that liver, does it suggest potentially a cancerous tumor? So you know, as a human, just one human, you only have one set of experience. How could we compare to a machine that potentially could have millions of humans' experiences put into a dimensions to analyze an outcome, or what we call AI analytics, that could detect a cancerous tumor with a higher accuracy than a human like you, even though you're human experts. Now, again, can this be something debatable? Of course, it can be, right? So that's why on the consequences side, this high stakes judgment, right, requires very strict regulations to govern, right? And it's something that it has not really started being looked into, right? Because a lot of the experts feels that what happens if I'm being replaced, or simply how can a machine be better than me? I don't believe that, right? So coming back to AI is not yet, or is not, right? So in healthcare, AI is not recognizing just an image. As I mentioned, it does have the capability to go beyond recognizing whether an organ is a liver or kidney, right? So this is something to debunk some of the myth, right? So that's one example of a healthcare application. Going on to the second application, public safety and security, trust, right? So we use it for border administration. We use it for law enforcement, right? Again, AI is not yet a kind of what would I say, providing new kind of transparency about data and inference yet, right? Because this requires a lot of data, and ultimately, actually, what AI aims to do is to detect and remove, right, or even reducing human biasness, right? The social elements of human, a lot comes from the kind of biasness, right? So again, when we talk about reinforcing some of this biasness, it actually doesn't help, right? So this is where AI is not yet there, right? And because of the fact that it's not yet there, innocent people may feel unjustifiably monitored, right? There's an uprise of, why are you taking my data, right? How are you using my data? And that's where PDPC, GDPR, all this came about, right? As a beginning. So in the future, we should really look at how to protect civil liberties and human biasness when it comes to public safety and security, right? So that's for the application. And last but not least, of course, everyone is worried about their jobs, right? But actually, the real challenge here is how not to marginalize humans, right? We are here, the AI is here to augment, to replace tasks, not a job. In fact, it should be creating new jobs, right? So that's the role of AI. But in the near future, we cannot avoid that AI is going to pose certain threats to certain jobs, certain kinds of jobs, right? So on the consequences side, actually AI today is being applied to the legal field. You realize that it has automated parts of the first year lawyers' jobs. So we don't have lawyers in this call, I hope so. But interns, people who just graduated today has a difficulty, right, when AI comes into play. So in the future, what holds is jobs will be affected, but jobs will be created. So continuous learning is really something that, as an individual, we should always focus on. So as Nicholas has mentioned, since I'm still studying, yes, I am, because, what I've done 10 years ago actually is already irrelevant. There are enterprises using technologies to replace what I was being taught 10 years ago in NUS, right? So if I have not improved myself, if I'm not gone into spaces where provides the future, right? I might be one of the unemployed individuals. So yeah, so that's a bit around employments. The AI is and is not. I hope this is useful. How you can use some of this information that has been shared. If you are in some of the application, look at the challenges and the consequences, right? Those are really important. Okay, moving on. Researchers, this is, if you're in the AI space research, or if you're working with someone, or if you're starting a business with someone focusing on AI, I'm sharing some fundamental methods, very hot methods, and how they are being applied today, right? So, you can actually, after this seminar, take some of these messages, go into more research works, right? Deep dive into some of the areas that you are interested in, or simply just connect with me. Happy to share a lot more, right? So the very first method, of course, large-scale machine learning, right? This is around the design of learning algorithms. For those who do not know what's algorithms, I give a very simple one. Mathematics, your linear regression starts with y equals to mx plus c, right? So that's a formula for line, right? So this forms a very simple algorithm, and when you need to build models, right, you need data, right, to fill up the m and the c, the mx plus c, right, the m and the c, right. You need to put in variables to test, right, and this forms multiple models, and whichever models that gives you the best outcome, right, you will use that to reinforce, right, your future models, right. So that's how large-scale machine learning basically does. And as you can see, large data sets, extremely large data sets. If you do not have that, you are not ready to do a large-scale machine learning yet. Hey, and should I start from scratch? Not really, right? So a lot of researchers, a lot of open sources already release such extreme large data sets for people to study, to come up with applications areas that can improve the enterprise well-being. right? So that's very first one. Now, the second one, of course, everyone is hearing deep learning, deep learning. This is just one of the class of learning procedure. Basically, it focuses on things like recognition of image, video labeling, activity recognizing, etc. So if you heard about face recognition techniques and stuff, yeah, those are part of deep learning. The next one, reinforcement learning. This is a framework, right, that shifts the focus of machine learning from pattern recognition to experience-driven decision making. Now, this is where early on I mentioned, what you have learned from the machine requires input from the experts, right? And the experts basically provides the experience-driven inputs, and you put that into the field, right? So that has largely been an academia sort of research in the past several decades, but today there are real-world successes. Just for those who did not know, in the marine industry, there are autonomous ships, right? So there are ships that are moving on their own with no captains, that the crews are basically doing some other value-added jobs, right? So it's happening already. Now, next part, robotics. Basically to train the robot to interact with humans, right? so that's what many of us understand. If that's not wrong, right? Again, the advancing of robots today is basically working closely with some other methods like deep learning or like computer visions, right? So let me jump into the next slide. So computer vision is another method. Today, a lot of people are hearing about this because it's the most prominent way of machine perception. It is actually a subsector of AI, right? And it's because of deep learning, computer vision become very prominent today. So they are doing tasks that, vision tasks that are better than human, right? So sometimes you guys probably see, I'm not too sure whether the SUSS canteen or, but NUS canteen actually has a robot that moves around to collect dishes and trays, right? So, so that is a robotic combined with computer vision, combining with deep learning. So three fundamental methods putting together to apply something that augment humans, right? So the next part is NLP, more speech related, right? And research now is really shifting away from the kind of interacting with people through dialogue, right? So not just those predefined requests, right? So a lot of us probably know that there are catalog requests that has been predefined with libraries to respond. But in the NLP, right, it can go as far as if you use Singlish, they can recognize you are from which country and which dialect, and so on and so forth, right? So it is around the interaction with people through the dialogues, right? Collaborative system research, yes. So again, how system work with human and develop an autonomous system that can help you to work collaboratively. So again, it requires you to have the algorithms to be tested through models, right? So that's something that was sharing with Chong Guan early on. So the last method here, crowdsourcing human computation research, is really around augmenting computer system by making some of the automated calls to human expertise to solve problems. Oh, and this sounds like the healthcare. Yes, exactly. So computer cannot solve things as well as expert. But how can this computer system know that, hey, this is something I don't know. Now I need to go to Nicholas, right? And Nicholas has the expertise for this, which me as a computer, I do not know, right? So that is crowdsourcing and human computations research. It's very interesting. Just a footnote there. There are certain AI that didn't turn out well because AI governance was not ahead of the technology, right? Basically, the technology went ahead of the governance. So IBM ended their facial recognition business as the CEO actually calls out biasness and inequalities in this technology, right? So you can see this is what is real and happening, and it just happened last year. Yep, three others. I think this is probably what SUSS love also, the socio-economical computing dimension. how to inject the social elements, right? Say, for example, if I'm a mentor, right? How is my profile as a mentor suitable to a group of co-founders, right? And be able to match that and align that, right? Before we conduct certain mentorship or training, right? So this is just one example, a real example that currently I'm working on. IoT, lots of buzzword, IoT 4.0, just a wide area of devices, right? Nothing more than that, right? Just imagine IoT as a way of collecting information. But today, remember I told you the robotics side could have elements of other research, right? So the IoT could perform tasks as well, right? And last but not least, the last part maybe is a little bit more scientific, right? The morphic computing, it involves mimicking the biological neural network in humans, right? So, I always imagine human bodies is like a building. That was where I came from, right? Where we have all the veins, the arteries. Likewise for buildings, you have a lot of self-sustaining pipes, water returns and stuff, right? So likewise for technology, we are trying to mimic the best in class, which is us, the human beings, right? How to mimic the biological neural networks and to help our hardware and software to be a lot more robust. If you remember just now, I mentioned that some of the challenges actually comes from the hardware, right? The trust on the efficiency of hardware, right? So again, hopefully this information has been useful. Just for those who have just joined, today's seminar is a lot more knowledge driven. It could be a little bit heavy, so I just want to do a checkpoint to make sure that everyone is comfortable. You don't have to know everything, but just pick what you need as you go along, right? Don't pressure yourself. Don't force yourself into knowing every single thing here. It's not possible, right? Hey, Andy, what's the trend? So many methods, so many applications. Number one, hyper-automation. So again, together with Nicholas, we'll be running a class ANL 505. Exactly, this is from Gartner, it's not from Endit, right? So, so hyper-automation is really something that begin the trend towards AI, right? Where we logically reason certain task, build it into, a machine, for the machine to start learning, for the machine to go towards the autonomous enterprise, right? There are many others, as you can see, things like a distributed cloud, like AWS, right? Practical blockchain, which SUSS is very strong in, and AI security and autonomous IoT. Yeah. So, I just want to reduce some words and put in 3 screenshots, although the screenshots comes with words. So that's not an excuse. Again, how do we rethink organization? It's really just 3 screenshots. So I'm just going to be very high level here. On the very top left-hand corner, the path to hyper-automation, right, involves simple automation, right, where you build rules, you build logic, and that's part of symbolic AI. You use technologies like robotic processing automation, right? Or you can use APIs to feed in information, and you simply use technology that provides you workflow, right, to automate some of the business processes, right? So as this thing continues, you realize that you can actually start serving people. So that's where the conversational UX happens, right? So you can have chatbots, virtual assistant, and as all these robots start working, they get responses from humans, right? That's when intelligence kicks in, right? And intelligence here can be broken down into 4 different dimensions, right? Which I will bring you down to the second screenshot over here. So AI work fundamentally 4 ways, right? Hardwired, which is hardware system, or adaptive system, typically the software side, right? So, and human in the loop, no human in the loop, right? So the very basic, simple automation, right? We talks about assisted intelligence, right? How the AI basically can assist you as a human to make decision, right? And these are hardwired systems that they do not learn, right? So for example, if you're using Tableau, right? If you're using, say, some of the dashboard in your systems, enterprise system, you're using Blackboard to see the number of students, right? These are assisted intelligence, right? You don't have to count one by one, right? You just click a button, it generates a report, right? To assist you to make the next decision. That is the first quadrant, right? On the left-hand side. Moving on to the right-hand side, no human is involved, right? That's perfect. That's when the hyperautomation, the middle part of the fishbone happens. Certain tasks are cognitive enough for the machine to take over. Why? Because the process is much more mature. The outcome and the inputs are matured. Matured means they are fixed. You don't change them for the next 10 years, for example. So in the education field, of course, 10-year series, right? So the questions or the way of teaching is the same, right? So you could put automation on top of that, right? And automate some of these tasks so that human don't involve, right? So that's the second quadrant. Moving down to the third quadrant, assisted intelligence, right? This is where AI system learn from you as a human, learn about how you make decisions, right? Learn about how you interact with human in your environment, right? So there are times when you are doing the manual work. There are times where the machine is doing the work for you, right? So that is a adaptive system. Typically, a lot of the software today are in this space, right? And finally, no human, everything taken over by hardware and software. That's when we achieve an autonomous intelligence, right? Where for a particular task, totally no human involved, and the AI system actually knows how to decide like a human, right? So these are the four, frameworks moving into AI. And if you take a look at it on the right-hand side, this is a classic real example of a autonomous ship progression, right? You can see from degree 1 to degree 4, right? On degree 1, it was purely what I mentioned early on, right? Where it was an assisted intelligence, right, by the seafarers. And when it start moving downwards, it actually hits full autonomous, where everything is just monitoring, emergency management. The human is only called in when something happens. What is something? First module, right? So tsunami happens. A lightning just suddenly decided to strike somewhere. This is even human cannot predict, right? So not anything related to God, right? Yeah, that is where even a fully autonomous part can't do. Of course, then human will kick in, right, to help another human, if you can put it that way, right? So it's pretty interesting. That's autonomous enterprise. If you are wondering, hey, and where should I start? Of course, join our courses. But anyway, where should I start? Start from which task is easier for a machine to work with you. I think that will be the questions for you to think about, right? So in view of time, right, I really want to push a little bit faster. I'm moving into the AI governance side of things, right? The design and technologies. Now, lots and lots of so-called ethical principles came out, but unfortunately, they lack institutional frameworks. They are non-binding, meaning to say they just simply put in a paper, but nobody is following. They are vague, right, and really abstract. Unfortunately, they are so abstract that I'm not putting them here, right? I only decided to pull out the keywords so that people who are interested in the governance side today, right, take a look at the keywords that I put it there, all right? These are the keywords that you can extract out from today's seminar and do your research, all right? So, yep, so for REMAS, we also have council member who is in the ISO 31050. So it is a framework that is still developing, which is around the guidance for managing emerging risk to enhance her resilience, right? So to increase the level of trust in management of risk through emerging technologies like AI. So as you can see over here on the right-hand side, a lot of the news coverage really are not covering enough on the ethical side. Only 20% or 22% of total news coverage is on AI ethics. There's a lot of hypes around, wow, this AI has raised $1 billion, a few $100 million. It's so successful, people are earning so much money, etc. Unfortunately, that's really taking the limelight, right, away from what is really important, which is the research work, the ethical work, the frameworks, right? So this is what the chart is trying to remind everyone. Don't be crowded by all these hypes, right? All this hype will lead us to the third AI winters. So while you're learning, take into consideration all these ethics, right? It's not about chasing after the technology, right? You want something more sustainable, think about all this. Well, okay, lots of words, but I will really keep it. I just want to bring out a lot more for the audience here. A quick, so if you want to focus, the purple words are the ones. So symbolic AI has been around for the long time, right? The longest time, rule-based AI. Actually, as long as neural network. So what's the difference between these two? One is very if-else oriented, right? So something must happen before something happens. Very logical. And they built this into computer codes, right? While neural network is around a black box, right? So this black box or this algorithm is opaque, right? And why isn't something that was popular back then, before? Because we don't have things like AWS, Azure, right, or Google Cloud. It requires a huge amount of data, right? And at that time, it is really inefficient, and the compute resources just doesn't support, right? And why is neural network so interesting, so useful? Unstructured data, data like voice, image, weird text, right? All these are hard to use symbolic AI to measure, right? To reason, right? And machine can't learn as well when you just simply use symbolic, or it can't scale as well as a neural network. So I put a nice 3-cat picture. That's pretty much like a facial like a recognition, right? Technology. So typically you put in some cat pixels, the algorithm will learn, create new models. When you put in another image that is random, and they can detect whether is there a cat, right? So this is what neural network could do together with computer visions, right? Now, hey, Endit, why is it so good and no one is using it as fast as possible? Because it comes with a lot of disadvantage that symbolic AI can address. First, like I mentioned, it's opaque, right? Meaning to say, even the original person who created the algorithm do not understand the output of that deep learning algorithm anymore. The creators don't even understood what the algorithm is trying to do in the deep learning space. And what does that mean? And it's very hard then to communicate, right? To debug certain scripts, for example, or even to troubleshoot some of the internal works, right? And trust me, neural network is very data hungry, right? And you need a lot of data to train it, right? But symbolic AI, it is more hierarchical, right? It has symbols that is easy to recognize, and neural network has totally no idea about this, right? So these are all the limitations. So in fact, some of the research study has done, if you put a simple high school mathematics and science to a neural network algorithm, it fails. It fails simple mathematics like 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 equals to 4. Right. So why? Because right, they probably analyze things, right, that are probably false positive, perhaps, right? So nobody knows. So why is the risk presented here, right, within such a complex revolution of that human can no longer leverage symbolic logic to detect, right? So neural network is really something that symbolic logic can't do, because it takes time to build the logics, right? And human can't catch up on that. So this is a question for the group to ponder upon. Can we deep learn and have neural networks into unknown risk attributes? Can we use neural network to govern another neural network? Something that the researchers are thinking about. Hey, and how about hybrid? Since each one has their own strength. IBM came out with MIT, with Watson, and this is still in the AI lab stage, right? So they have this term of neural symbolic concept learner. It is a hybrid, but you realize that it is still not matured, right, at this present moment. So in a nutshell, right, the third generation hasn't been really defined yet. And for those who are in this call, welcome, right? You're on this very, very beginning of S-curve, right, towards this generation, right? So that's why you realize that there are questions that even you and I, we're still finding answers, and I have no answers for you today, right? Now, a lot of things are, in order for us to plot the future, we need to know what our governments are doing or what our neighboring governments are doing, right? So in this case, here I have I pick out 4 countries, right? To keep it very simple, Singapore, as all of us know, Smart Nation, the Digital Government Office, right? Today there was an announcement, right? That they are opening up new jobs, getting people to, under the SNDGO, right? To adopt technology, right? There are 5 AI projects over there. So if you take a look at some of the AI projects, if you are working in any one of these, congratulations. You potentially could get some government support. And there are fundings pledged, right, in 2017, close to 150 million Singapore dollars over 5 years. And the focus in Singapore is really about public sector data security and citizens' private data today. Right, that's for Singapore. How about US? US work, of course, the White House is the one, right? They are looking from the standards perspective, testing, deployment. They are looking at AI-ready workforce. They're also looking at collaborating with foreign partners. Fantastic, right? So promoting US leadership. So for Singapore, we love to be part of this partnership, right? And what US is focusing recently is really around public trust and confidence, right? And focusing internally in their federal government, right? So this is what is happening in US. China, interesting, right? So China, yes, AI strategy is one of the most comprehensive in the world. For those who are not aware, they have a lot of R&D, talent development. In fact, there was a report stating that China's journals, China's research on AI their citation has exceeded the citation coming from US. So people are citing more China AI researchers' work than the US researchers' work. Very interesting, right? So that's something keep everyone in the lookout. China is focusing on UAVs, voice, and they are really trying to innovate their capabilities. They have even created this AI innovation and development zone with a Beijing AI principle, right, Mark. So they are working closely with private players, schools, like Tencent and Baidu, right? So that's in China. Now I picked Saudi Arabia because not too sure whether everyone is aware of the global news. Saudi Arabia is trying to reduce their reliance on oil. They want to stop being recognized as an oil country. They want to move into places like energy, right, AI, right, to basically diversify the risk that they are having, right, of what oil is actually a finite resource, right? So the moment oil is gone, they will lose their stand, right? So they are looking at working very closely with partners. So for people who are going to start up, they are really trying to attract foreign talents, foreign investment, and they are aiming for like 300 AI and data startups to be in their country. So if you are going to raise funds, etc., this probably will be a great place for you to look out for and mingle with, right? Again, Saudi Arabia government also very actively working with China. You can see they sign a a collaboration agreement with China's Huawei and Alibaba Cloud, right, to design AI-related Arabic language systems. So take advantage of that, SUSS, if there is some form of partnership that an institution can enter. I think it's wonderful. So I'm coming close to closing my seminar. I hope everyone was able to take back something. I want to funnel down to 4 principles, right? Digital transformation of enterprise is really driven by the type of AI technology you use. Today, the explosive innovation is actually a way to promote, right? It's not really a way to sustain, right? So we must always have that cross collaboration in mind. So why I share that 4 countries, so that I can open up everyone's mind around what a collaboration could look like at home and cross-border, right? And lastly, I hope there will be people who will work with me to establish the 3rd generation of AI, be it the theory side or the application side, which is the industrialization side, right? So these are the 4 principles, without forgetting the 2 dimensions. So the 2 dimensions where we talk about the social aspects, right? The individual himself, how is it going to affect his family, the institution that he's contributing to, the society he's in, and the human community, right? And this helps you to think a little bit deeper into things like mentality, the morality side of things. So you may want to inject some mental elements, right? If your AI is related to elderlies, then should you be injecting some granularity related elements, right? Apart from just business and the technology side of things, right? To build this sustainable AI of yours, right? So again, when I'm listing out all these dimensions, I'm hoping that people will take this dimension into considerations, right? Into their objective, into their key results when they are running their business, right? So it's really important you apply this rather than listening to me and walk away, right? Then there's no value at the end of the day. Now, human and machine, I guess you heard a lot, right? It's really about how machine augment human and human augment machine. We are what this entire seminar is all about is really about balancing these 2 acts and putting a risk control, right? So that we have all this coordinated and integrated, even in the way we design our businesses, our technology, right? So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we don't fall into another AI winter where the hype goes so high and it dies down again. So sustainable AI is really about ongoing journey. These are the partners you should be working with, and learn from the past. Don't repeat the past, right? Create an ecology for a healthy development of AI, right? So these are my references, let's get connected. I have my emails there, my LinkedIn. I'm actually an expert member with AIII and also a associate lecturer with SUSS. And I have a few AI governance project right now ongoing with the NUS GRIP program, which is the Graduate Research Innovation Project, and also SUTD Lean Launchpad project. And you can see these are some of the ML and AI related projects. And I'm also working closely with the committee on the ISO side through RIMAS. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. Back to you.
I'm going to open up for Q&A and see whether anyone has any questions to ask Andy.
Sure. Thanks, Nicholas. Of course, I may not be able to answer all the questions, so bear with me if I have to come back to you guys. It's a very futuristic concept that has been shared.
I guess if I ask you, what would AI look like 200 years from now, I think that's probably not, it will be difficult to guess, right? Anyone's guess. But anyone has any questions?
Actually, I could answer that. I hope we really can coexist. Remember, I talked about the balancing act. Neither the machine is going to kill the human, nor the human is going to kill the machine. The finding of the balance to coexist is actually what the rationale behind why AI governance should be there. right? To set a ceiling and a control.
Okay. You know, I guess from an economics perspective, right, it really boils down to who owns the machines, right?
Yep.
If you're a machine owner, you can just sit back, kick back, and then just relax. But if you're not a machine owner, then your job might potentially be automated away, depending on the kind of jobs that you do. Yeah.
Yep. So on the part where machine augment human, right? Our owners could be the machine, and you know, where we take instructions from them. So that is how the thinking might change in the, you know, in the 200 years, if I would put it that way. Yep.
Hi. Oh yeah, maybe one question. Just to that's maybe that you can highlight and did.
Sure,
You talk about
Kochi.
ethics in AI, right?
Sure.
How about moral AI? You know, it seems like things like if I have an autonomous car or a autonomous plane and something goes wrong, right? And I need the car or the plane needs to do something. You need to make a decision. Should I crash into a village or I crash into the other place there's only one person? Right?
Yeah.
Where does the ethics, I mean the moral part of it comes into place, the decision, or maybe the philosophy comes into it as on what kind of decision when object loses control, right? And the AI has to take over. It becomes a moral issue.
Yep. Definitely is something that we have taught before. In fact, prior to this presentation, we were talking about it.
Right.
It is really about how early do we bring this design concept. Right. So I always share with some of the companies that I mentor, right, that don't just look at the technology itself, right? So like for right now, you have talked about there's this scenario, right, that someone has to make a decision, right? And perhaps in your company, there are pilots, right, that are your advisor, right? And I'm sure they have gone through trainings, they have gone through decision-making procedures. So some of this knowledge has to be injected into, you know, the technology, right? Either, you know, so we call it the risk assessment methods. So the what are the kind of risk assessment methods do you want to put in place, you know, to measure or what we usually call the controls, to measure the consequences, thereby measuring the types of decisions that you need to bring out. You know, the good news here is today in the ISO environment, there's the ISO 31010, right? That the ISO committee is trying to study what would be a risk management framework assessment methods that is suitable for what sort of decision making, and before that, what sort of control has to be set in place. And this is where organization can put together the humans, the brain, together with a tool, right, to basically make a technology not so technical. So yep. So this is a long answer to a short question, but I would say, you know, even if I say, hey, you know, just crash here, right? But tomorrow when that city becomes a recognized city for very important research, again, you're crashing into a very, very dangerous place.
Yeah. So that's where I think, you know, would this be a roadblock for future AI? You know, it's let's say you put into a car and the car goes out of control, and then it's either you turn left and you hit an old man, or turn right hits a young boy, right? Either one will die. Who will you choose? It's just like, you know, the philosophy question, right? You crash into 5 prisoners or 1 person who is, you know, that kind.
Actually, it's not just that. The person that you're going to crash, going to kill, their social status, you know, their impact to society, to economy. Do we have all this data to justify? And okay, then that's only the objective side of things, right? The thing about AI is a lot of people think AI is just a fixated technology that can be easily transferred. But unfortunately, it's a lot more dynamic than we think, right? We must see the entire governance of AI from the perspective of how the surrounding are changing, right? To mold the decision that one has to make, right? So actually, the same thing that you have mentioned happens in healthcare every single day, right? Let's say when COVID comes in, during the COVID season, I think all of us experience it. Shortage of beds, right? The emergency, the ER rooms are all taken up, right? They have no choice to put beds outside, you know, or even set up tents and stuff. You know, all these are learnings that has to be captured into helping the technology to learn better so that they can offer a much better decision. Trust me, even as a human, people give up humans at a certain point in time. But by giving up the human, they are protected by certain ethical, I would say, practices or international agreed regulations, right, or governance. So for example, if I had to give up, say, an old person to the another old person, so what makes this old person more valuable? So the medical professional will probably evaluate his other health conditions and predict his estimated lifespan, right? And that's probably what maybe in the medical records has stated from a medical ethics perspective. So things like this has been very matured. And this is what AI governance needs to work towards. And it is down to every industry domain's efforts, right? So whoever comes up first, we will see those governance coming in. Yep.
I think we have some questions about AI ethics. If you look at the
Yes.
chat, we have a question from Joyce, Elaine, and also Paul also add on to that.
Cool.
Would you be able to answer the questions?
So let me look at LF Lai. There are a few sectors involved in AI in Singapore. Will you see that there's a law coming just like PDPA? Oh, absolutely. LF. I think PDPA is just one of the very tiny pillar. So if you are in my earlier presentation, it's just around the public security side of things, right? So it isn't really covering the entire sort of AI governance. So we should be seeing a lot more AI related governance, but at the top level, right? What is that framework? It has to come first. So you realize that that's the reason why I actually show this chart, right? What is the guidance and framework? It is not something that people are talking actively about right now, unfortunately. And that's the reason why there's a lack of some of this. And the more people contribute, like for example, Prof. Kong just mentioned this idea, right? And if you start researching and contributing, then there will be a framework, there will be a regulation that can set up, right, to govern that aspects, right? So again, saying a new ISO to govern and control, not so much, ISO is really just a guidance, right? It is a guidance first, before organization use the guidance as a framework in terms of how they make decision or how they run, right? So that's the rationale behind ISO. Of course, a lot of people has a misinterpretation of ISO, but ISO is not a brand. It's not a, you know, it's not like Gucci or Armani or or Coach. It's not. It is really helping organization to have to set a framework that is consistent across the industry internationally. So Joy's question: can moral be designed into algorithm? Would AI be able to teach or taught moral? Yeah, you know, Joyce, I would love to have this conversation after this seminar with you. My belief is if we can quantify moral, then my y equals to mx plus c, right, a very simple linear regression, can be taught in a very elementary level, right? And then we progressively build a lot more complex algorithm simply because we are measuring a lot more dimensions, not because we want to make it complex, right? So I hope people in the call understand that. So my short answer, yes. But the question back to you is, can you quantify it, right? So Just like, I like to share with people in healthcare, people quantify pain. I'm not sure whether you guys went to a hospital before and the doctor asks you, how do you feel pain right now from 0 to 10? I'm not sure whether how you feel, right? It just feels weird, right? They try to put images, right? They try their best through visuals, but how accurate is that quantitative analysis, right? So again, question for the rest of the team to think about. Yelin Tan, if AI can be taught ethics as well, that would be good. Oh, absolutely. If neural network can be such a great technology, in fact, in AI, we have a concept of AI on AI. Will the AI 3.0 be an environment, right, where an AI is actually policing and watching an AI, right? But again, this is a never-ending conversation. Likewise, you say that there's a military police policing a police. It's actually a never-ending question, like too, right? So who is policing the MPs, etc., right? So there is always a point where we mark as reasonably ethical, and that has to be agreed in the form of a consensus, right? Paul, interesting talk. To what extent REMAS needs to and is able to incorporate AI and AI ethics in the practice beyond what was already required due to human intelligence that transgress the rules. So, we started last year. In Europe, they actually started back in 2016, right? Talking about this AI and risk and ethics, right? But REMAS is really trying to advocate the framework and guidance to enterprises to help them to move towards this realm of autonomous enterprise, right? So, but before that, they should take into consideration some of these ethical elements, right? So from organization to society, instead of from bottom up, because from a society perspective, it's really challenging, both politically and in terms of economical scale, right? So again, yes, REMAS is definitely on an ongoing journey in this sustainable AI. In fact, we are planning to start a chapter. We recently started a chapter on cybersecurity, right? So with very, very keen focus on cybersecurity as one of the research area. So feel free to ping me if you have any questions. I'd like to move to Chong Han, right? Would like to ask on what are the optimal infrastructure required to sustain an AI system like data centers. So, Chong Han, if you do not have the number of data centers that AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Alibaba Cloud has, use them. Unless you say you're in that business, right? I always say that, are you even ISO 27001 certified? Have you gone through your SOC type 1, type 2 audits? Have you gone through some of this? Have you done this number of penetration tests? If that's not your core business, you shouldn't be worrying about building this yourself. There's lots and lots of resources out there you should take advantage of, right? So that is where collaborative system research come in, right? So you can't do everything yourself. So check out with people like Amazon. They probably have the answers for you. And Joyce, thank you. And then I will reach out to, okay, cool. Yep, love to have a chat with you, Joyce. I love the topic on moral. Timothy, you mentioned about the different domains of AI and like machine learning, neural networks, and robotics, even NLP. These are the buzzwords. Yep. So how can they be applied in integrated approach to enable problem solving? Good question. If society is able to use AI to solve real world problem? Yeah, of course. So Timothy, thanks for the question. As I mentioned earlier on in one of my slides, let me just bring you back to that slide. Perhaps I was a little bit too fast to do the timing. Like I mentioned, computer vision don't just exist alone. And actually, these are buzzwords purely because these are real fundamental methods that researchers are using, right, to offer usable areas of studies for technologies like you and I to apply it, right? So a lot of us actually shouldn't see some of this as a standalone, right? They actually work hand in hand better, right? So you should have a mix of like computer visions with robotics, right? But again, I shall not go too deep into when should I do this, how should I do this, right? Of course, it will go down into the rabbit hole of business modeling, asking the right question and stuff, right? So again, Timothy, love to get in touch with you to expand this. But Industry 4.0, in my view, is just a way for government, all right, or even for individual companies to capture data that is needed, right, for the elements of governance and development, right? Because no data, that's basically nothing, right? Yeah, thanks, James. Have another meeting. Safe AI, great sharing. Thanks, Paul. I will take a look at that. Lots of sharings from everyone. Need to execute as well. Okay, so there's a point on. Okay. Cool. RPA and hyper automation. RPA is just one of the tools that you can use, right? Especially from the OCR perspective, right? But hyper automation is a lot more around business process management, right? And automate this entire management. So today you don't have to fill out a form, bring the form to room A to look for, say, a Prof Kong, right? And get him to sign, and then take the paper, scan it into a machine, attach it into an email, send it out, write a chat, right? So on and so forth. Right? So you realize that all these are manual processes, right? So hyper automation is here to address that under this light, automation. Yeah. So yeah, those are very short answers. I wish I could share more, but discussion here. I really do hope from here we can carry forward. Yeah. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Chong and Kong Chin for organizing. Joanna.
Thank you,
take care, everybody.
Thank you so
I look forward
much.
to talking to you guys.
See you around.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you. See you around. Bye bye.
Okay, bye. Thanks, Edith.
Thank you.
Catch up with you. Yep. Again.